Rylan Jace didn't expect to end his Tuesday inside a medical bay on a space station orbiting a dying sun. He especially didn't plan to do it with his left arm dangling out of its socket like a broken marionette limb. But plans had a habit of unraveling fast when you were one of the few humans on an alien-run research outpost, and you volunteered for everything dangerous because apparently your bones healed faster than your sense of caution. The incident started in Habitat Module C7, where a minor gravitational glitch had caused the artificial gravity to pulse unpredictably. Rylan had been helping secure floating crates when the floor pulled itself up to greet him mid-hop. There was a sickening crunch, a flash of pain, and then the world tilted. His shoulder had dislocated the moment he landed, his body twisting slightly mid-air. He inhaled sharply, then sat down, back against the wall, cradling the arm. "Medical, this is Rylan Jace in C7, he said into the comm clipped on his jacket. "Dislocated shoulder. I need extraction." A voice buzzed back in a mix of syllables and clicks, then converted to English. "Understood. Nurse Vetra en route." By the time the medical drone arrived, Rylan's shirt was soaked in sweat. He didn't dare move the arm. It throbbed with a deep, gnawing ache that pulsed through his entire left side. Nurse Vetra, a tall, semi-transparent alien from the Dislocate species, hovered into the room, her limbs moving in smooth, wave-like patterns. Her eyes, four of them, blinked independently. "Rylan Jace, you're conscious. Good. I will administer a stabilizer and transport you." "Appreciated," Rylan muttered, gritting his teeth. The stabilizer worked. His pain dulled to a manageable roar, and he was floated gently onto a gurney. The ride to the med bay was fast, but not fast enough to keep word from spreading. By the time they got him into the exam room, 2 technicians, a translator drone, and a junior xenobiologist had gathered outside the observation window. Humans were still new to the interspecies cooperative, and the crew had developed a fascination with their biological quirks. An injury? That was a spectacle. Nurse Vetra began scanning his shoulder with a diagnostic wand. The scan displayed a holographic projection of his skeleton, the ball of his humerus clearly out of its socket. "You have torn several ligaments. Joint is dislocated. This is a severe injury." "Yeah, I know," Rylan said. "Just tell me what's next. You must not move. I will prepare the relocation protocol." She turned to retrieve a toolkit. The moment her back was turned, Rylan flexed his jaw, took a deep breath, and leaned his torso slightly to the right. The movement was controlled, surgical. He exhaled sharply, hooked his right hand under his left elbow, and with a quick motion, popped the joint back into place. There was a meaty thump. Nurse Vetra turned just in time to see it. Her skin pulsed a deep violet, the alien equivalent of nausea. Her eyes widened, blinked in rapid succession, and she wobbled on her stilting legs. Then, without a word, she pitched sideways and collapsed, flat on the medbay floor. "Oh, come on," Rylan groaned, cradling his now relocated shoulder. "Really?" A technician rushed in. "Vetra has fainted." "What did you do?" "I put my shoulder back," Rylan said. "It was dislocated." "You relocated it yourself?" "Yeah, it's not my first time." The technician stared at him, horrified. "That is not a procedure one performs unassisted." "Not usually, no." Medical staff rushed to revive Vetra, wheeling her out. Rylan was left sitting on the exam bed, arm now secured in a brace, as the remaining staff took over. Dr. Saru, a gray-skinned alien with eyes like mercury, entered minutes later. "You relocated a major joint manually," he said. "That is highly inadvisable." "I know. But you guys looked like you were about to run a full surgical suite for it. We were preparing appropriate sedation and alignment tools. I didn't have time for all that." Saru examined the scans. "You have minor tearing. You will require several weeks of limited movement. Ligaments do not regenerate quickly." "How many weeks?" "Between 4 and 6, assuming no further trauma." Rylan frowned. "Got it. Do not attempt such maneuvers again." "Noted." 2 days later, Vetra requested a meeting. She stood awkwardly in the observation lounge, her posture stiffer than usual. Rylan had his arm in a sling and a cup of something resembling coffee in his right hand. "I owe you an apology," she said. "My reaction was unprofessional. You fainted. It happens. I was not prepared for such a display of self-inflicted adjustment. It was disturbing. I didn't mean to cause a scene. I've dislocated that shoulder before. Old injury." She blinked slowly. "Humans are uniquely bold with their bodies. Sometimes we have to be, especially when help isn't immediate. She paused. Is it common for your species to perform such self-corrections? Not common, but not unheard of, especially among climbers, athletes, soldiers. I see. The conversation drifted to his recovery plan. Rylan was scheduled for physical therapy sessions with a joint specialist from the Cyrelian race, known for their understanding of soft tissue mechanics. His first session was grueling. The specialist, a tall, bipedal creature named Helrix, had several appendages designed for massage, tension release, and joint manipulation. Rylan winced through the stretches. You must not overexert, Helrix said. Even mild strain could prolong healing. I'm not trying to be a hero, Rylan muttered. Just want to get back to work. You will, but time is the only medicine for ligament damage. By week 2, the swelling had gone down. He could rotate the arm slightly without pain, but lifting anything heavier than a small data pad was still out of the question. Meanwhile, his story had become a kind of legend. During meals in the common hall, crew members from other modules would glance over or ask questions. You really fixed your own shoulder? A young avian researcher asked once. Rylan nodded. Wasn't fun. You must have an extremely high threshold for pain. Pain's not the point. It was about necessity. The attention made him uncomfortable. He wasn't trying to show off. His job required physical readiness. He didn't have the luxury of waiting around when something could be handled in a minute. Still, the incident had ripple effects. The station's medical protocol was revised. Now, any human injury required a human-specific response unit. A new training module was created to help alien staff understand human joints and muscular tolerances. Rylan was asked to consult. You're turning me into a textbook, he muttered to Tessa Dern, the station's human psychologist. You did something dramatic. People respond to that. It wasn't dramatic. It was a fix. To them, it was like watching someone pull out their own tooth mid-conversation. Rylan sighed. I didn't mean for Vetra to faint. She's fine. She even added a section to the training guide titled Voluntary Limb Repositioning Among Homo Sapiens, Risk Factors and Cultural Context. He coughed a laugh. Great. I'm a case study. You're a wake-up call. The aliens didn't think humans could do that. Neither did some humans, probably. By week 4, Rylan's shoulder was steadily improving. He could lift light tools, rotate the arm overhead, and the pain had dulled to a background whisper. Herrick's cleared him for basic duty, but warned him about overuse. Any strain now will undo your progress. I'm being careful. True to his word, Rylan stuck to the recovery plan. He avoided heavy lifting, used assistive drones for crate work, and focused on recalibrating systems with his good arm. It was frustrating, but he knew the risks. One morning, as he walked into the bay with Tessa for a systems check, they found Vetra waiting. I wish to observe your mobility, she said. Rylan nodded. He moved the arm through a range of motions. Vetra observed silently, then said, You have recovered well. Thanks to the therapy. She hesitated. Would you show me the motion you used to relocate the joint? He raised an eyebrow. You sure? This time, I am prepared. He demonstrated slowly, without applying force. Her eyes followed each motion. Fascinating. Still don't recommend trying it. I will not. The room fell quiet for a moment. Rylan Jace, Vetra said, Your resilience is not just physical. It is instructive. He gave a small smile. We all do what we have to. She inclined her head. Indeed. 3 weeks after the shoulder incident, Rylan was perched inside an access shaft no wider than a coffin, half upside down, balancing on one boot against the inner strut of a coolant conduit. His sling was finally off, though a dull ache still rippled through his rotator cuff whenever he reached too far. He grunted, adjusted the microtorch in his right hand, and yelled down the shaft. You said this was a 2-minute fix. From below came the unmistakable chirp of Cern, the Zaitari technician whose limbs bent like wet rope. I said simple, not short. The welds are decoupled from your side. You're closer. Closer doesn't mean safer. Human bones are denser. You'll survive a panel collapse better than I will. Rylan sighed and continued welding. Flickers of orange light danced across his visor. His body was wedged awkwardly between 2 bundles of fiber cabling, and every time he shifted, his shoulder ground against the edge of a junction box. He worked anyway. The station had suffered a fluctuation in thermoregulation after a solar flare skimmed the edge of the star they orbited. It cooked the outer hull of Module E12 and sent a ripple through the environmental subsystems. With the heat regulators offline, the internal core temperature had jumped by 12 degrees. Not dangerous, but enough to panic the aquatic species living in the hydroponic wing. By the time Rylan climbed out, shirt soaked and one knee scraped raw, the conduit hummed back to life. He slumped against the wall and pulled off his gloves. CERN peered at him from around the corner, antennae twitching. You humans always look like you're about to collapse when you're fine. It's confusing. Maybe you all need better expressions. Your faces do too much. Later that evening, Rylan was summoned to a briefing in the central hub. The request came via diplomatic courier, which usually meant something official and uncomfortable. He arrived just as the last of the senior staff were filing in. The conference room was dim, the walls lined with shimmering blue data panels. At the far end stood Commander Ithis, a towering avian with feathers like polished obsidian. She gestured for silence. There has been an incident on the surface of Theros 4, she said. An archaeo research team uncovered a dormant reactor beneath the polar basin. It activated unexpectedly. One of the researchers is trapped inside the containment field. A hologram flickered to life above the table, showing a jagged ice shelf with a fissure cutting deep into the ground. A pale dome pulsed at the center, encircled by fractured metal pylons. Inside, a humanoid figure lay motionless. They triggered a fail-safe protocol. The structure sealed itself. We can't bypass the outer shell with standard tools. Someone asked about transporter interference. Ithis shook her head. There's a localized magnetic disturbance. No beam in or beam out. We need a manual extraction. Silence followed. Then she turned to Rylan. You're the only human rated for atmospheric pressure variance under those conditions. He blinked. You want me to go into that thing? I want you to retrieve the researcher. The dome is degrading. She has oxygen for 15 hours, give or take. You've got suits for this? Our gear isn't calibrated for sudden kinetic shifts. The structure's internal gravity is fluctuating. CERN leaned forward. You've been inside a gravity field that shifts mid-cycle. Once, Rylan said. Didn't enjoy it. Then you understand what to expect. No, I understand it'll suck. They gave him 4 hours to prepare. He spent 2 of them reviewing the field schematics and the rest in the suit bay with Tessa, who handed him a neural stabilizer patch. Why do I need this? You're walking into a field with inconsistent up and down. It might scramble your equilibrium. This'll keep your inner ear from turning into soup. Comforting. She glanced at the diagnostic screen. Your shoulder's not at full strength. You understand that, right? If I wait until it is, someone dies. You always do this. Do what? Say something noble, then walk into a nightmare. I'm just doing my job. Most people's jobs don't include falling into collapsing alien reactors. He pulled on the suit and sealed the clasps. The armor plating was reinforced along the joints, and the exomesh wrapped snugly around his midsection. He flexed the repaired arm. It twinged but held. The drop to the planet was rough. The shuttle skipped across the upper atmosphere like a stone before stabilizing. The surface was a frozen wasteland, a mess of jagged ice and sulfuric mist. The dome loomed ahead, embedded in the glacier like a blister. The magnetic field warped the light around it, making it shimmer like a mirage. Rylan disembarked with a single pack and a plasma saw. He moved slowly, boots crunching across brittle ice. As he approached the dome, his HUD flickered. Flux spike, the onboard assistant warned. Recalibrating. He ignored it and reached the access seam. The outer surface was warm to the touch, which made no sense in sub-zero temperatures. He pressed the plasma saw to the seam and braced. It took 32 seconds to cut an opening large enough to crawl through. The moment he breached the seal, the gravity shifted. He fell sideways and landed on what his suit told him was the ceiling. Fun, he muttered. Inside, the structure was a labyrinth of hexagonal corridors, each pulsing faintly with residual energy. His suit adjusted orientation with each step, but his stomach didn't. By the time he found the central chamber, his teeth were gritted and his vision swam. The trapped researcher lay inside a transparent containment capsule. Her vitals blinked weakly on the side panel. Rylan scanned it. Pressure lock engaged. Manual override required. He pried off the panel cover and reached in. The wiring was alien, but the logic was familiar. Circuits still obeyed current flow, and he could trace the failsafe through the junctions. Manual override engaged, his HUD confirmed. The capsule hissed and opened. The woman inside, a pale-skinned humanoid with gill slits along her neck, stirred weakly. "You're real," she said. "For now." He lifted her gently, cradling her weight across his back. The motion pulled at his shoulder, which immediately protested. He ignored it and began retracing his steps. The corridor now pulsed faster. The energy signature was spiking. Collapse imminent, his HUD warned. No kidding. He moved faster, dodging falling panels and swirls of magnetic discharge. The gravity flipped twice. He caught himself both times, but the second nearly dislocated the same arm again. He reached the breach just as the dome began to crack. He tossed the plasma saw ahead, slung the researcher through the opening, and rolled after her. They hit the ice hard, but the cold was a relief after the furnace heat inside. The team met them with medical stretchers and heat shields. Rylan collapsed onto his back, helmet fogging. "She's stable," one of the medics said. "Good," Rylan muttered. "I'd hate to have done all that for nothing." They lifted him onto a sled and began the return to the shuttle. One of the crew, a broad-shouldered reptilian, knelt beside him. "You humans are full of contradictions." "Like what?" "You're fragile, and yet you survive things that should break you." He laughed weakly. "That's just stubbornness wearing a helmet." The shuttle took off just as the dome imploded behind them, sending a shockwave that cracked the glacier for kilometers. Rylan watched the explosion from the viewport. "You're going to need joint therapy again," the medic said, examining his shoulder. "Yeah," he said. "Probably both this time." The next morning, Rylan woke to a stabbing ache in his left arm that made him question every decision leading up to crawling into a collapsing alien facility. He sat up slowly and winced as his shoulder flared. The medical patch had slipped during the night, leaving the joint unsupported. He peeled it off and rolled it into a ball, chucking it toward the disposal chute. At precisely second bell, what the station clocks called the start of the work cycle DR. Saru and Helrix arrived in tandem, neither waiting for the other to speak first. "You strained the supraspinatus and likely aggravated the anterior capsule," Helrix said, unpacking a kit of stretching bands and a compact stim unit. "That sounds expensive in medical Latin," Rylan muttered, standing already halfway into a stretch. "It means your shoulder is arguing with the rest of your torso about who's really in charge," Helrix replied. Saru held up a tablet. "You're grounded until we complete a full kinetic scan. I'm authorizing neural dampeners to manage the pain, but no load-bearing activities." Rylan flexed his fingers. "I didn't come here to sit in a chair." "You're going to sit in a chair, lie on a table, and then sit in another chair, because that's how soft tissue heals," Saru snapped, uncharacteristically blunt. Helrix plugged the stim unit into the wall. "Strip to the waist and lie on your side. I'm starting with neuromuscular mapping." The session lasted an hour and a half. Rylan gritted his teeth while microcurrents danced under his skin and Helrix adjusted the stimulation pattern every few minutes. When it was over, his shoulder felt like it had been both massaged and electrocuted. "You've got scar formation along the anterior band. That's what's limiting your range," Helrix said while taping a thermal wrap across the joint. "Can that be fixed?" "With time and compliance," Helrix answered. "Neither of which you enjoy." Rylan dressed and left without arguing. He spent the next 2 days rotating between physical therapy, enforced rest, and giving briefings to engineering teams about what he'd seen inside the reactor dome. The station command had requested first-hand insights on the dome's shifting gravity field, and Rylan was the only person who'd walked through it and come back upright. During a midday meal on the third day, Vetra approached him in the mess hall. She carried a small slate and looked unusually hesitant. "I have received a request from the Medical Advisory Board," she said, setting the slate down. "They want to understand your recovery profile. Specifically, how your musculoskeletal system tolerates repeated trauma." "You want to scan me again?" "No. They asked for a demonstration." Rylan blinked. "A demonstration of what? Me getting injured?" "No. Of your compensatory mechanics. They want to see how you adapt mid-injury." He stared at her. "You want me to re-injure myself on purpose?" Vetra's eyes clicked in a rapid sequence. "No. But they believe observing your motion patterns under strain will yield data that could improve cross-species emergency protocol design." He rubbed the back of his neck. "If I say no, they'll simulate it using synthetic musculature and motion algorithms. But the results will be less accurate." An hour later, he stood in the motion analysis chamber wearing a sleeveless compression suit while 6 cameras tracked his every movement. He was connected to a biofeedback loop that mapped strain tolerance in real time. Vetra, Helrix, and two Cyrelian data analysts watched from an adjacent room. Begin with shoulder flexion to 70 degrees, Helrix instructed through the speaker. Rylan raised his left arm slowly. The graph spiked. He stopped just short of the limit. Now apply rotational torque while maintaining flexion. He twisted his torso. The pull was immediate. Pain level? Vetra asked. 6. Maybe 7 if I keep going. Don't keep going, Helrix said. They ran through a dozen more movements, each one pushing the joint toward its tolerance limit without crossing it. Sweat beaded down Rylan's spine, but he endured it. After the session, he sat on the bench, toweling off. Vetra stepped into the room with her slate. You exceeded expected thresholds in rotational control. Your body recruits secondary muscles to stabilize the joint. Compensation. The body hates instability. Is that something you learned through training? No. That's just surviving bad decisions. She tilted her head. Your physiology is chaotic, but your adaptation is not. Welcome to humanity. By the end of the week, Saru had reviewed the full kinetic report and signed off on limited duty. Rylan was cleared for diagnostics and systems management, nothing involving physical strain. He accepted it without complaint. That same day, CERN flagged him down outside the hydroponics bay. You're not gonna like this, the Zaitari said, antennae twitching. What now? Containment breach in one of the lower biocores. Not dangerous, but messy. Something ruptured a fluid conduit and sprayed half the corridor. It's like walking through wet algae. Rylan followed him down 2 levels and immediately regretted not wearing seal boots. The corridor floor squelched with every step, and the walls glistened with a greenish film. A small maintenance drone lay half-submerged in the sludge, twitching. Poor thing never stood a chance, CERN muttered. Rylan crouched beside it, careful not to slip. He tapped into its diagnostic port. Power cells intact. Just shorted on contact. I can patch it. He pulled out a multitool and began connecting a bypass cable. As he worked, he noticed the fluid was reacting to the ambient light, contracting slightly when shadows passed over it. Is this stuff alive? Bioluminescent algae strain. It mutates rapidly under artificial light. Rylan nudged a patch of it with the back of his glove. It recoiled. Great. Sentient soup. The drone powered back on with a chirp and zipped upright, spinning once in apparent confusion before zooming off down the corridor. That's the second one to short out in this wing, CERN said. We need better shielding. I'll log it. But someone's gonna need to scrape this stuff off the walls. You volunteering? Rylan looked at his shoulder. Not today. Later that evening, Tessa stopped by his quarters with 2 mugs and a lopsided grin. I brought you something that looks like coffee and tastes like regret. He took the mug and sipped. That's offensively accurate. You've been busy for someone on limited duty. I've been careful. She flopped into the chair across from him. You know, I looked up your file. You've dislocated that shoulder 4 times. 5 now. And every time, you just kept going. I don't see the point in stopping. Maybe the point is knowing when to. He stared at the wall for a moment. I never said I had good timing. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that didn't need filling. Eventually, Tessa stood. Try not to add anything new to your medical chart this week. I'll do my best. The next morning, Rylan joined the engineering crew in the central chamber to recalibrate the station's inertial dampeners. No heavy lifting, just interface work. As he adjusted the output parameters, he noticed something strange in the feedback loop: a delay in system response time. He flagged it, ran a bypass test, and isolated the issue to a firmware mismatch. No wonder things have been twitchy, he said, patching in the corrected version. The dampeners stabilized. Across the station, the subtle oscillation that had been plaguing the crew for days vanished. The maintenance chief gave him a thumbs up. By the end of the cycle, his shoulder was stiff but not throbbing. The joint held through the full range of motion. Helrix confirmed his progress and removed the last of the support banding. You're officially back to baseline, the Cyrelian said. Congratulations. You're as functional as you were when you first showed up. Rylan rotated his arm and smiled. Then I guess it's time to break something else. Please don't. No promises. That evening, as the station lights dimmed for rest cycle, he sat in the observation dome watching the dying sun flicker through the outer shields. The flare that had caused so much chaos had faded, and the corona danced in slow, graceful arcs. Vetra joined him silently, settling into the adjacent seat. I have submitted the motion data to the advisory board, she said. They were Impressed. Glad to contribute. There is one question they posed that I could not answer. Shoot. Why do humans persist through pain when rest would suffice? He thought about it. Because sometimes, stopping isn't an option. Not if someone's counting on you. She considered that. A logical answer. But also, uniquely human. He raised his mug. We're full of contradictions. She tilted her head. And occasionally, full of dislocated shoulders. They sat together in silence, watching the stars drift. There was no emergency, no injury, no unexpected spike in gravity. Just the quiet hum of the station and the stubborn, steady rhythm of recovery.